Okay, we have some corollaries that come out of some of the fields that a lot of the NLP ideas were drawn from. Cybernetics is one of the big fields that a lot of the ideas came out of and are borrowed from, whatever you want to say. The idea of a feedback loop. You have some output coming out of the system. If you feed that output back in, you can then change your behaviors depending on what happened. Kind of the idea that meaning is in a response that you get. We have the law of requisite variety, which is something that could be handy as teachers, as people who interact with other people. None of you interact with anybody, do you? Ever. Huh. That is that basically whoever has the most flexibility wins. The technical definition is the regulator must have more variety in outputs and or inputs. So if you have a system, whoever has control can regulate the system has to have either more possibilities of behavior, outputs, or be able to see, hear, smell, taste, touch, more things on the input side. As teachers, we sometimes have limitations on what we can do in the classroom. We have a little bit of limitation on the output. So, that just means we have to be able to hear more. We have to see more. And hopefully that's why you're here now. So, whoever has the most flexibility wins. How many of you think that you have more flexibility than the students that you interact with? A few of you feel that way. Some days, the students are definitely more flexible. You never quite know what that student in the back corner is going to do. Huh. So, we have some ideas that came out of psychology. The law of effect is stated as you get more of what you positively reinforce. I'm not so sure that we even need the word positively in there. You get more of what you reinforce. So, we find all the mistakes in a student's paper, mark them with red ink, hand them back. What did we just reinforce?
I hate writing papers.
So, they start looking at their papers and they are looking for what's wrong, instead of looking at their papers and going, hey, look at all these things that I did right. Oh yeah, I made a few mistakes, but out of this 10-page paper, I only have a few marks. They took up half a page on a few instances, but I only got a few things, that weren't as what the teacher expected. So, another idea that falls into our expertise is the idea of state-dependent learning. That you have to be in the same state to access the things that you've learned as you were when you learned them. They've taken a class of medical students who were all doing very well. Last few weeks of class, they had to do construction in the room, so they moved them to another room to take their final exam. Most of them bombed it. So they said, well, wait, what happened here? Hey, why don't you schedule another time that you can go back to the original room now that the construction's done. Bring them all in, don't tell them you're going to do it. They won't be able to prepare anymore. Sit them down, give them basically the same test, let them go. Sure enough, they all passed, flying colors, everything was great. So, some of the other things that fall in that, how many of your students study hyped up on caffeine? And then they come to class, and they can't drink enough to keep that high going, so they can't get access to all those things that they crammed the night before.
Now, does this mean that if a student learns something in this classroom, you can't apply it in the world?
No, not necessarily. It's just that typically, whatever state you're in, some of that is environmental, most of that tends to be internal state. So if you are in the I can't do math state the whole time that you're in class, and then you go to take the test, and you're trying to convince yourself you know these things, then wait, now we're in different states. It's a lot easier to start with a good state the whole time, carry it through, so that when you do go to perform, but that is one aspect of why people have troubles taking what they learn in the classroom when they learn in a seminar and go out in the real world. So keep that in mind. There's one reason that I'm not too fond of assigned seating. I'd rather they move around a little. Because what happens if, hey, somebody's sitting in my seat? They have that identification. So what if that's the only place that they can learn from? When we do the full practitioner training, we'll talk a little bit more about how people sort through information. And you'll find that people have certain directions that they look to access some of their information. And so, yes, if that's your seat, you want that seat. If you can't get that seat, you'll probably get the next one back, or the one behind that. So people tend to sit at the same places in a room, whatever their seat is. Why? Because it's easier to get the information in. It may or may not actually be useful, but that's what they're used to. Hey, come on, I'm comfortable. So, what that really means is, when we come back from break, okay, we have general semantics. We have a few ideas that came out of there. The subjectivity of experience. This is the whole idea that people respond to their map, not to the world. So, you've decided that in your map, smiling means that people like you. And you may come across people that don't smile. And you may decide, oh, they don't like me. And so you're not responding to the person, the reality in the world, you're responding to that map that you've made. Speaking of breaks, let's take one. We'll wander around for a few minutes, come back. We'll take a look at representational systems.